Hi, it's Dayna, and I'm here with your divination for the full moon in sidereal Cancer. The 2026 sidereal astrology guide says balancing, giving, and receiving care. Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know to do. So this is the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide. It is the ninth annual edition of your personal horoscope workbook. The best thing about this is you actually need to know nothing about astrology. I'm the expert. I know all the things, so I put them in this book for you. I walk you through the personal application of 1 year of astrology, month by month, transit by transit, so you can get a personal feel for what each month and each week brings for you. I've got some evergreen content in here, such as all of this dope information about each of the signs, what their ideal is, what their task is. And this is a way for you to get started with sidereal and really begin to understand what it means for you, not just in the static sense of what your sign is, but how you are living this astrology every single day. And I'm a guide and walk you through it. I just want to start off with a couple of announcements before I get into the nitty gritty of what is going on in the sky. One, printed and bound 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guides are back in stock. Get yours. Number two, I just created a new offering for February, which is the month of love. And it's called For Your Love in honor of the beautiful love song by Stevie Wonder. And it is for singles, it is for couples, it is for anyone who's trying to get a look at what love is going to be like for them in 2026 based on their sign or their birth chart. You can go to the description and click that link and book. Or if you're watching live on Instagram right now, you can go into my bio and you can book there. Only in February. If you don't catch it in February, you won't catch it at all. I don't think that I've ever offered a love reading specifically. It's always a topic that people can bring up in readings, but you would be surprised how infrequently people ask me about love and relationships in readings, which is the perfect segue to this full moon, which is a full moon in sidereal Cancer, balancing, giving, and receiving care. For a while now, I've been talking about the astrological parallels between the end of 2019 and the first part of 2020. And it is not lost on me that one of the parallels that has seemed to emerge is occurring in the same location. George Floyd was murdered by the state in 2020, and Renee Good and now Alex Preddy have been murdered by the state in 2026, both, all three of them in Minneapolis. And what I want to draw attention to in terms of balancing giving and receiving care is the people's response and reaction to the violence. In both instances, it has inspired a creation of new networks, fortifying of old networks, and establishing of new channels of giving and receiving care. One of the things that capitalism does, one of the ways that it manipulates us is by creating a false sense of comfort that actually leaves us over reliant on the state for care. It convinces us that the only means by which we can receive care is through state sanctioned channels and the care that the state allows us to receive, always filtered through, shaped by white supremacy and patriarchy. I believe she's a doctor, Tressie McCullum. I don't know. I don't even know if I'm saying her name right. Y'all know who Tressie is. Forgive me for calling this woman by her first name without a handle. But in a recent video clip, she was talking about, I don't know if she was talking about the Black Panther Party or what it was, but she talked about, I'm going to assume it was the Black Panther Party, that the reason why the Black Panther Party was so dangerous in the eyes of the state is because it rendered the state irrelevant. It disrupted the dependency that the state had created for citizens to be trapped in. The state created these prisons of dependency, quite frankly. And the Black Panther Party created channels and networks of care where the state was not even serving the people that the Black Panther Party was serving. The state would rather these people be left in desperation because desperate people will take crumbs. But the Black Panther Party established free clinics. They were getting people's eyes checked, getting people doctor's appointments, prescriptions for their medication. They were feeding children. I mean, this was rendering the state irrelevant. And the last thing the state wants is to be rendered irrelevant because that means that the power they have hoarded and consolidated is no longer hoarded and consolidated. Transits through sidereal Capricorn and Cancer. I talked about this yesterday on the 2026 forecast that I presented on Zoom. I'll share the links where you can rewatch that in the description. But I talked about how eclipses are moving into Cancer and Capricorn this summer with a new moon solar eclipse in sidereal Cancer. The nodes will switch over in November, but the summer new moon will be close enough to the nodes for it to be an eclipse, and it'll be in Cancer. Historically, activity across Cancer and Capricorn correlates to economic revolutions, shifts, and changes. The communist revolution in Cuba, the day that it all went down was, I believe, a full moon eclipse in Capricorn. If we go back to 45's first term, Mars retrograde in Capricorn, along with eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn, then correlated to tax cuts for corporations that we are experiencing the fallout from now. That there were some benefits that the average worker received during that time, but they were set to expire, and those have expired, which is why people are seeing higher tax bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because corporate tax cuts always are paid for by poor people. Part of why this full moon is about balancing giving and receiving care is twofold. Capricorn is the caretaker, which we talked about before. And Cancer, by way of the moon, is about being taken care of. Capricorn folks are always finding a Cancer or someone moon prominent to take care of. And the point I'm trying to get to is that in capitalism, all labor is caretaking labor. You may have heard me use this phrase and talk about it during the Mars retrograde in Cancer, which was fall 2024, winter 2025. All labor is caretaking labor. All work is caretaking. It's just a matter of who's the recipient of the care that your labor provides. Yeah, you may be scanning groceries at Aldi's, but you are not the recipient of care of that labor. Often, care comes in the form of money. Because what do you do when you get money? You buy care. Money is to buy care. Currency is to buy care. So when you're scanning the groceries, greeting the customers at Aldi, they swipe their card, that money is not going to you. You are allotted a small portion of that money, or caretaking tokens, as I like to call them. Dollars, euros, yen, uh, uh, pounds, Canadian dollars, pesos. Those are caretaking tokens, because I don't care what you are doing for work. I don't care if you are sewing brains back together, making sure children cross the street. Your labor is to take care of someone, because what is an economy but a means to valuing and distributing care? What is an economy but a way that we value care and distribute that care? Now, there's lots of different care that we give and receive, but in capitalism, we're talking about how I buy the care that I need with money. Sometimes this is really literal, like right now, how are we going to buy the health care that we need with the currency that we are allotted? Everywhere we turn, we are exchanging dollars for care. We need someone to drive us to our next destination. We need someone to prepare our food. We need someone to dry clean our laundry. We need someone to teach our children. We need someone to tend to our wounds. We need someone to build our home. We need someone to prepare our plumbing so that we can get the care that we need. So when we have a conversation about billionaires, when we have a conversation about wealth hoarding, what's actually happening, it is care hoarding. When you are hoarding $1 billion, you are saying, I want to have all of the caretaking tokens so that I will have the means to get all the care that I could ever need or want. When corporations lobby for tax credits so that they don't have to pay any taxes, what they're saying is, I don't want anyone else to have the care that they need. I want it all for myself. Money is really abstract, and particularly in this time where we swipe cards and Apple Pay and all of these things where we're not touching actual dollars. Money has become incredibly abstract. But if you are in any way interested in seeing change, you need to de-abstractify money. And it needs to be something real. It needs to be something you can relate to, and it needs to be something you can quantify. If I say that someone is a billionaire, that they have assets or cash worth $1 billion, your mind can't even quantify that. You can't even wrap your mind around that. But if I say that someone has hoarded 1 billion caretaking tokens while you only get 500 caretaking tokens on your check every 2 weeks, I think that makes it a little bit more plain for you. What is the amount of work or labor that someone can do to make them worthy of 1 billion caretaking tokens, and you worthy of only 500 caretaking tokens. How much care could you possibly need that you need 1 billion tokens to get it? Make it make sense. It's been what, 2, 3, 4 weeks since I posted a clip on my page um about Beyonce becoming a billionaire, and people are still arguing in the comments, and they're still missing the freaking point. Like, people don't want me to talk about Beyonce. They're like, why do you have to keep talking about her? Why don't you talk about other billionaires? Because the point that I'm making in that clip is very, it is very, I don't want to say exclusive to Beyonce, but she is really a prime example of how celebrities use parasocial relationships with their fans and audience to disarm them from perceiving them as a threat, even when they're hoarding all the caretaking tokens for themselves. I really want for you to rework the logic in your brain. Stop saying billionaire. Stop saying millionaire. Stop saying money. Call them caretaking tokens, because that's what they are. If you watch the Diddy doc, he got somebody spraying his cologne on him, putting his chain on him, cutting his hair for him, running his bath water for him, getting drugs for him, getting women for him, booking the hotel, all every single way that he could purchase someone's labor so that they could care for him. He's done it. Balancing giving and receiving care also admonishes us to reevaluate the valuation of labor and why some people's labor is worth more than other people's labor. Some kinds of labor or some kinds of care are worth more than other kinds of care. And it is so pervasive, the way that we devalue some forms of care or labor and overly value other forms of care or labor, that you don't even think to question it. You don't even think to question why a person who becomes a millionaire, why the work that they do is valued more than the person who's checking you out at the grocery store. Because at the end of the day, you need the person checking you out at the grocery store more than you need the person who is some CEO getting a bonus of $50 million at the end of the fiscal year. What shall you do with the caretaking tokens you've been allotted? The lower the amount of caretaking tokens you have, the less care you're able to get, right? So balancing giving and receiving care is, yes, this is about the relationship dynamics of your most interpersonal and intimate connections. Yes, this is a moment to evaluate your position in your relationships and the role that you naturally take on in your relationships. Are you the recipient of care, or are you the giver of care? Are you setting the emotional tone and orienting the people in your life around your own comfort, right? Or are you the person who orients yourself to alleviate the distress and comfort of other people? Balancing giving and receiving care is meant to alert you to these dynamics and understand your role. Now, hey, listen. When we talk about balancing giving and receiving care, this isn't always a dynamic we choose. If we are chronically ill, if we are disabled, if we are experiencing an extended period of grief and loss, if we are developmentally disabled or challenged, more than likely the dynamics of care in our life are going to be imbalanced, that we need much more care than we're able to give. And that's normal. That's natural. But the problem in capitalism is that the way that we structure care is in hierarchies that are determined by race and gender. I am really often astounded by people's resistance to having a real conversation about these topics. And it reinforces for me that what we are up against is not unwillingness. We are not up against intellectual barriers. We are not up against any of those things. We are up against incredibly effective propaganda. We are up against a religiosity that cannot be penetrated by intellectual means. When I share clips of this podcast on social media, most of the time, the majority of the responses are people in gratitude for the way I've illuminated their personal struggle, gratitude for putting language to something they have not been able to articulate but have understood on some level. But there are a lot of people who, whether they're in the comments or not, their reaction is to regurgitate their indoctrination and propaganda. Nobody wants to acknowledge or unwittingly find themselves aware of the fact that they have been indoctrinated with propaganda. And particularly the kind of propaganda that America imposes on us and the world. It makes you internalize the propaganda as reality rather than someone's explanation, rather than someone's belief that you're internalized. People want to make these distinctions between fact and beliefs. But I don't think that there is as hard of a line of distinction between those two things as you really want them to be. And it's actually very discomforting to realize how permeable the line between fact and belief is. Because all a fact is a belief that most people believe. It was a fact that the earth was flat before the earth was round. For many people, it was a fact that police could be reformed before they learned that you cannot reform the police. That line between fact and belief is not a line at all. It's a perforated edge. Yet many people regurgitate their propaganda indoctrination as if it is fact, as if it is immutable, undeniable, irrefutable, unrebuttable fact. One of the reasons why I often enjoy coming to the full moon in Cancer each year is that Cancer transits including this full moon, have a way of reminding us that we have a body. While everybody's all typing happy with their fingers on their phones and on their screens, the people in Minnesota are bearing the physical and emotional brunt of actual terrorism in their streets, in their homes, in their places of worship, in their places of business and schools. Everybody can theorize how they would respond and what people need to do, and also the story that you want to tell or believe about a specific occurrence. But when there is no screen to serve as a barrier between your body and your nervous system and the reality that is in your environment, it don't matter. None of that matters. Cancer reminds us that at the end of the day, someone hoarding $1 billion, also to be understood as 1 billion caretaking tokens, has a material, emotional, nervous system consequence for you. When you go to bed at night, you are not sitting and thinking about how you will spend your free time the next day, what loved ones you will relax with. You're not thinking about how easy it's going to be for you to go to your doctor's appointment and get the care that you need. You're not thinking about how you'll get to spend all day with your children, enjoying them. That's not what you're thinking about when you go to bed. You're thinking about that email from your coworker that you didn't answer. You're thinking about the bill that's going to come out of your account and whether or not you have enough to cover it. You're thinking about going and picking up that prescription and wondering whether you'll have to get a prior authorization from your insurance company or whether they'll cover it at all. You're thinking about how expensive groceries are. Those thoughts aren't intellectual, they're a nervous system orientation to not having enough care and having to ration what little care you've been allotted, and to have to think about how you're going to use your time, your mental energy, and your physical labor to make sure that somebody else somewhere else gets to have all the caretaking tokens they could possibly ever want or need. Revolution begins in the body. Revolution begins with the sobriety of being with the reality of how your circumstances are emotionally impacting you. So much of the rebuttals and regurgitation of propaganda that people have to the things that I say on this podcast is to shield themselves from the helplessness and hopelessness and fear that inevitably comes up when you accept the truth that these people want you to die. When you accept the truth that somebody having $1 billion means you don't have enough. This is math. All of this, there's enough for everybody in the abundance of my manifestation. Yeah, there is enough for everybody, and you need to go get your enough from the people who are hoarding it. You need to take it back. You need to stop giving it to them. Balancing giving and receiving care, I want to end on this note before I pull some cards. Balancing giving and receiving care is about a reorientation of your understanding and conceptualizing of what qualifies as care. When you go into the parking lot to collect the buggies or the carts that the shoppers have left. That's caretaking. And you getting your caretaking tokens for it. When you are standing security at the door of the hospital or the bank, that's care. And you're getting your caretaking tokens for it. Some of you are doing caretaking that you don't even get caretaking tokens for. You're wiping snotty noses and nursing in the middle of the night, changing diapers. All work, all labor is caretaking. So you need to ask yourself, or you need to go read a book to find the answer to the question, why is your labor, why is your caretaking worth so much less than other people's? The answer is not because you don't work hard enough. I don't hate to be a broken record. I love to be a broken record. The answer is not because you haven't focused. The answer is not because you haven't locked in. The answer is not because you haven't put in enough effort. The propaganda is meant to make you feel like and believe that your capacity to have what you need is only limited by how hard you're willing to work. And that is truly a lie. It's a lie from the pit of hell. It's absolutely a lie. Free yourself. Free yourself. Free yourself from taking responsibility for something that is not your responsibility. Yeah, in reality, we live in capitalism. You got to go to work, you got to get your check, you got to pay your bills, and that's just the world that we're living in. But you don't like it. And if you do like it, I don't I don't even know what to tell you. Let's pull some cards. I'm back with my tarot cards. We are, as always, opening ourselves up to what guidance and wisdom and insight is available available to us through the symbolism of the tarot, what intuitive guidance that we are truly in dire need of in this moment can empower us, what perspectives are beneficial to take on in terms of how we see and understand ourselves and what's happening in our worlds and environments in this moment at this full moon of balancing, giving, and receiving care. We're starting off with the High Priestess. The High Priestess is a card about deepening our self-trust. It is about perceiving truths that we have no material evidence for. This full moon is trine Saturn in Pisces, and one of the ways that I understand Pisces is the recognition of nonverbal signals that alert us to patterns. That Cancer Pisces trine for me is about how one of the ultimate forms or means by which we can feel taken care of is when we're receiving care that we didn't ask for. We're receiving care that we didn't even know that we needed. We're receiving care that we have not articulated or verbalized. We're receiving care because someone else has done the labor of recognizing our patterns. They notice when we're off. They notice when we're not coming and going as we normally do, when we're not sleeping and waking as we normally do, when we're not eating or communicating in the tone of voice that we normally do. They are tapped in and tuned into our patterns. And they respond without asking for permission or needing to be told verbally. For many of us, this translates to recognizing our own patterns as signals that we are in need of care. It's so important to understand that our capacity to be at home in the vulnerability of needing care and receiving care relies upon us having been felt. To be felt means that someone allows themselves to be influenced by you emotionally. I want to be clear that when I'm talking about giving and receiving care, I'm not talking about conversations. I'm not talking about words. I'm not talking about naming feelings. I'm talking about the gift of cancer, which is attunement, to resonate on the same emotional level or frequency, which allows me to understand without words what it is that you need and to be moved to respond to it. Why isn't our government structured in this way? Why don't our elected representatives function in a way that they are tapped in and tuned in to the needs of their constituents? Zohran Mamdani has the Cancer Capricorn opposition in his birth chart. And you can see how that Capricorn equips him with the skills of being a competent caretaker. He knows what to say. He's tapped into the needs of his constituents to the point that it makes us all feel envious of the care that New Yorkers are receiving. It's not perfect. It's not the ultimate destination of where we want to be, but is a manifestation of caretaking by an elected official that we don't have a reference point for. Cancer is always reminding us of our entitlement to receive care. Many of you do not feel entitled to receiving care for a variety of reasons. The primary one being you've been indoctrinated to believe that you need to earn care. You don't need to earn care. Care is not something that you earn. You are born helpless and you die helpless. And in between, of course, equal to your ability, you participate in the giving and receiving of care. The more able you are, the more care you have the capacity to give, such that when you are unable, there's somebody who's able to give you care. Why is it that we do not feel entitled to the intuitive knowing from our elected officials, from our economic system? Why doesn't our economic system actually serve our needs? Shouldn't an economic system be intuitive in a way that it anticipates the needs of the people who participate in it? This economic system is not intuitively anticipating your needs. It is manipulated to facilitate the hoarding of caretaking tokens for a small few and prevent you from getting more. And you've been so indoctrinated that you will get in my comments, you will talk to your friends about why it is that somebody else deserves more caretaking tokens than you do. Why somebody deserves more caretaking tokens than your first grade teacher, your mama, your stay-at-home dad, the CNA or the home health aide that's taking care of your grandmother. It's immoral. You have been indoctrinated with propaganda that has soured your moral compass. where you don't see the weak as deserving of care, you see them as something you hope you will never be so that you are not in their position of not having enough care. Let's pull some more cards. We've got the Magician and we've got the Eight of Swords. The Magician and High Priestess are a really fascinating combination to me because they are kind of two sides of the same coin. The High Priestess is about things that are not verbalized, things that are not explicit. It is about being able to tap into and become aware of that which is gestating and that which has not yet been birthed or materialized. It's being able to see something as it's forming and rightly identify it and respond to it. It's about this level of self trust that allows us to tap into an inner knowing without the evidence or reassurance of other people's beliefs, right? And the Magician is about the adeptness and the facility with which we are able to communicate what it is that we have to say. I often associate it with words, but it doesn't have to be associated with words. In this moment, I'm thinking about how in Divination for Liberation, sidereal astrology, the four elements are fire, earth, air, and water, and I understand them as tools. And in each of our birth charts, we are allotted a proportion of these tools based on the signs that are occupied in our birth chart. The tool of water, which Cancer is where the full moon is this month, and Pisces, where Saturn is. That tool of water is about our feelings. It is about our body and our bodily functions. And when we have an abundance of water, that becomes the tool that we are most adept at working with. It becomes the one that we reach for. And in a somatic sense, it is about our feelings and our emotions and our bodily functions having a higher volume in the mix, so to speak, that we are more present to and we are more affected by our own bodies and our own feelings and our own emotions. And so when I see the Magician within this context, I'm thinking about attunement to oneself and being affected by one's own body as a skill that can be developed in moments where we are under a sky with copious amounts of water. In the 2026 forecast I presented on Zoom yesterday, I talked about how the dominant tool of 2026 is water. And we are going to see that at this full moon, but also during a Pisces stellium, which I'll be talking about in March and April. Jupiter's going to come to Cancer June 1st. We will have a Mercury retrograde that is partially in Cancer, and Mars will enter its retrograde shadow in Cancer later this year. All of this water is saying the primary tool that we collectively have to work with in this moment is water. And this full moon is a check-in to say, how well do you know how to work with water? Are you collecting water if you're a person who doesn't have enough water in their birth chart or any water at all? What are you doing with your overflow if you are a person who has a lot of water in their birth chart? If you have a lot of water in your birth chart, there is maybe a overriding sense of emotional self-protection and isolation, a heightened sense of skepticism and suspicion that makes you distrust yourself or other people, or you struggle with addiction and indulgence because the noise of your own emotional reality is too much to bear. And so you use substances or behaviors to change what it is that you feel rather than feeling what it is that you actually feel. This full moon is giving us an opportunity to check in on our skill level with being affected by our own bodies and how that impacts the way that we give and receive care in our relationships, but also to observe the patterns of giving and receiving care in a larger scale, whether that's in our healthcare system where nurses are organizing after the murder of Alex Preddy. Nurses are striking in California, in Hawaii, because they do not believe that they are staffed appropriately to give the care that patients need in hospitals. right? All of these ways of that we are quantifying and observing how care is allotted and how care is received. Who in our society is deemed as being deserving of care? And who in our society is deemed as not being deserving of care? Do you deem yourself to be deserving of care? How would you act if you were deserving of care? How would you behave? How would you show up in your relationships if you really felt deserving of care? How would you show up politically? What would you be doing in the political sphere? And I don't mean just voting. How would you show up and what would you do if you really felt like you were deserving of care? And what are the barriers that are in the way of you feeling deserving of care? Who's made you feel like a burden? Who's ignored you into not even being able to feel your own body or tap into the emotions that you feel? Who's shamed you for being in need? Who hurt you and punished you when you were vulnerable and asking for help? And how has that contributed to how triggering it can be for you to be in the vulnerable position of needing care? Everybody needs care. It's just what's the story you're telling about it? Everybody is in need of care. It's just how entitled do you feel to it? Everybody's in need of care. It's just a matter of, are you aware of it or not? And if you're not aware of it, why aren't you aware of the fact that you need care? And if you don't and feel entitled to care, why don't you feel entitled to care? If you are judging and shaming people's GoFundMe, is it because you're jealous that you don't have the confidence to reach out in your time of need? You feel like you just have to do it by yourself? If you see folks panhandling on the corner, what is the emotional response that you have? They're getting the care tokens they need by any means necessary, even if their dignity and their pride is on the line in the process. Is your dignity and your pride in the way of you giving and receiving care? Eight of Swords. This is a card that I like to associate it with two different things. The first thing is making things unnecessarily hard for ourselves, overthinking it to the point that it's a barrier to the ease that's right there. The second association I have with this card is about accommodations. Often we get trapped in cycles of thought as a means to solving problems, or in this case, getting our needs met, when it's not a intellectual problem that we're having. And I think one of the ways that this manifested this full moon for me is that people often associate um, emotional intelligence as the capacity to intellectually understand how you feel or verbally communicate what you need. And while those things may be helpful components of emotional intelligence or emotional availability, I don't think that that's the full picture. The gift of water signs, of the tool of water, is to be affected by our own body. To be affected by your own body means that you are tuned in and tapped into the sensations that are manifesting in your body. You are able to be present to what the physical aspects of your emotional experience are. Emotions are physical, they're not intellectual. Emotions are not the words you use to name feelings. They're the feelings you have in your body in response to external or internal stimuli. That stimuli could be your own thoughts. It could be your own belief system. It could be something that someone said to you. It could be the interpretation you have of what someone said or did to you. It could be the physical contact somebody makes or doesn't make with you, right? But we're talking about the physical embodied reaction or response, not the word that your brain gives it. Because the word that your brain gives it is a social construct of your society. There are sensations and emotions that we don't even have words for in the English language. We got to borrow words from other languages. You see it all the time on social media. Someone will post a image or a graphic of a word from another language like German or Japanese, and it'll be describing an emotional experience that you've had, but not one that we have a word for culturally. There is a cultural dynamic to your capacity to be affected by your own body. Emotions are as much of a physical thing that we're experiencing, whether or not we have the words for it, as it is the sensations that we've decided to pay attention to as a society. It makes me think about female genital mutilation and this practice that has gone on in many societies for a very long time. And while women have experienced pain, incontinence, and prolapse of their internal reproductive organs, what is the language that they have to name and talk about the depth of that pain and process? It's a pain that's unique to their culture. So I'm certain they have words and they have concepts for that pain that we don't have here. But there's also ways that we ignore the pain of marginalized people in our society. We ignore the pain of gender dysphoria that trans people and people who are not trans experience because the gender binary is a violent construct that we impose on people before they're even born. What what sensations and emotional experiences are you having that you don't even have words for? Can you trust the truth that your body lives in, even when you don't have a witness through words to name it? We can always start with, do I like it or do I don't like it? That's where we can always start. Let's call this done. Thank you for tuning into the Divination for Liberation podcast. I am Dayna Lynn Nuckolls, also known as the People's Oracle. I will see you in 2 weeks at the new moon in sidereal Aquarius, which will be an eclipse. Yes, eclipse season is nigh, and we are talking about privacy and surveillance. Yeah, that's relevant, isn't it? We are talking about being seen versus being erased. We are talking about humiliation and embarrassment. We are talking about self determination. These are all themes that we are dealing with in this series of eclipses in sidereal Leo and Aquarius. In the meantime, make sure that you are checking the link I'm going to put in the description to see what the wastewater is doing as far as COVID in your area. I think we are on the other side of a surge at this point, and transmission of COVID, particularly in the Northeast and Midwest, is receding. Elsewhere tends to be pretty good. I'm always of the mind that you should mask in indoor spaces because that's what I do, and that's what I'm going to continue to do until they get a sterilizing vaccine for all strains of COVID. I hope that you are staying warm. If you are in any of these very, very, very cold and snowy locales right now, you take care of yourself. Bye.